Producer's Room, a streaming web series featuring the creators behind the hit songs of today's music industry. Songwriters, music producers, and artists discuss their creative process as well as examining current issues and technologies in today's rapidly changing music business. Your host is producer, songwriter, and educator Dave Tuff. Welcome to the Producer's Room. Welcome to this episode of the Producer's Room. We are taking our trip of around Los Angeles. Now we're in the Valley today. And Matt, what's your studio's name?
Infinitespin Recorders.
That's pretty cool. So we're here at Infinitespin Recorders, Matt's studio. We're going to bring Matt
sign
on.
language. Everything's sign language.
We're going to bring Matt on here in just a second. But first, who's this guy here? I don't even know. He's like Anyway, we're going to bring Matt on here in a minute. This is Ross Hogarth. If you guys don't know Ross's smiling face,
hey,
you've probably seen it all over the internet.
on the walls of who knows?
Yeah.
Cheetahs.
Ross is a good guy, though. Ross is a good guy. I think actually I met you first walking down the alley at AES in San Francisco. You were going to some studio party, but
okay.
Anyway, I don't remember when we met. But okay, so
the one year they had AES in San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly. The gratuitous bio of Ross is Government Mule, Roger Waters, which ties in just to the last track you were playing there. Black Crowes, Sean Colvin, Mellencamp, of course. I want to get there too. REM, Jewel, and just a bunch more cool artists. Flogging Molly, and then you were just playing some Rita Coolidge.
You're
finishing up the record. You guys have finished, right?
Yeah, the record. I finished it just before Christmas.
Awesome. So I want to get into that and how it all works here in LA. Oh, but then we'll just throw in Motley Crue and Keb Mo, which you won a Grammy nominated this year.
We're nominated for the Taj Mo record, which is
Nice.
Taj Mahal and Keb Mo. Nominated for the previous record, which was called Blues Americana.
Nice.
That was the first Best Engineer nomination I've ever gotten.
Oh, and then you
personally.
got a Pensado's
I got a Pensado award.
For engineering.
But we won Slow Down in 98 or 97 for Best Contemporary Blues. So maybe we'll get another one next weekend.
Keb is in Nashville. Isn't he based in Nashville?
He lives in Nashville now.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
Franklin.
Cool. Awesome, man. Yeah. So anyway, that's Ross, and
that's all you need to know.
This is really long, but But anyway, it's pretty cool. Like, I like your references page. You got Edgar Winter, Melissa Etheridge. It just goes on and on. Keltner, of course, which I'm a recovering drummer, so I'd like to talk about Keltner and Kenny and all your, the dudes that you call friends. It's pretty cool.
Well, as a drummer myself
Are you?
originally, yeah, I was really. I mean,
Okay.
I still have a kid in the house because my son is a drummer.
Yeah.
He's a better drummer than me now. But drums, I think, are the hardest instrument most engineers can't record well when they come up. And so a lot of engineers don't ever get past drums, which was fortunate for me because coming up off the road and coming into engineering as a drummer, it's not like an ego thing, but my drum sounds were pretty good right off the bat.
Right.
Which kind of helped me get
Some
hired.
early gigs, yeah.
Yeah, and then we created drum sounds, and as a drummer, I think with sound you have to know what it sounds like in your head before you can actually record it.
Right.
A lot of people have no idea, because the musical part of engineering is kind of crucial. I mean, I think that's a lot of people miss that part. Is like, the listening part.
Right.
Like, really, I got 2 ears and 1 mouth. I should really be listening, not talking as an engineer often. So a lot of times when you go in the studio, most engineers that come up and really don't really make it, they don't get past the drums. So,
Yeah.
I was fortunate, and I was fortunate to come off the road having been a drum tech for Keltner, Mick Fleetwood.
Wow, man.
Having worked standing on the side of the stage, watching guys like Richie in Little Feat, and having a sense of what a drum sound's supposed to be, which is a well-tuned drum kit with microphones that are placed correctly.
So yeah, well, because I really do want to get in the Rita record and talk about how you guys tracked that live and all that. But just covering a little bit of history. So I know people can find a lot of this out there, so I encourage you to look for other, podcasts and interviews that Ross has done, but I told him I want to cover some new ground. So as far as just a little bit of background, though. So you're originally from?
Born in New York.
Okay.
raised in New York.
Okay.
I always say I'd be dead if I never left because I pulled the ripcord pretty early in my life.
Yeah.
But I was very fortunate growing up to be surrounded by art and music.
Yeah.
And that
Parents musical or just grew up
my
musical?
my father is a very well-known and famous artist. He passed away over 20 years ago.
Okay.
But my dad was Burne Hogarth, B-U-R-N-E, Hogarth, the original illustrator of Tarzan.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
he founded the School of Visual Arts in New York.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
I
great.
grew up in also education because my dad was and is, his art books are the most used art books
Man.
of how to draw.
I had no idea. That's great.
So if you look up the Burne Hogarth dynamic drawing series, you'll see where that's, that. So I got that side with my dad, basically mentoring me in like what it is to look at a painting or understanding art. I could never really draw.
Yeah,
So I don't have that DNA, and I didn't, that I didn't get. It kind of got handed down to my son. My mother sang in church, and but I grew up around Pete Seeger as our family's best friends. So Pete Seeger and the Guthries, Arlo and his kids, and Pete and Toshi. My mom still lives in the town of Beacon. She's 91. She moved out of New York and up to Beacon over 30 years ago, where Pete and Toshi lived. And so I grew up with the Seegers as my.
That's so cool.
So my Christmases were spent like at the Seegers and stuff. And so as a kid growing up, I worked on the Hudson River Sloop, which had a lot of circle musician, like you'd play banjo and fiddle and mandolin.
Yeah.
So that allowed me, when I left New York and got into working as a roadie and working for people like David Lindley and Ry Cooder, particularly Lindley, who played fiddle, he played bouzouki and saz and slide, and so having stringed instruments, because I went from drums to stringed instruments and French horn as a kid growing up because I wanted melody.
Yeah, exactly.
And then played guitar in like some punk bands and stuff in the city, and then bailed out of New York and came out here.
So that was then with the bail, that was the roadie.
Came
years.
out, became a roadie here.
Yeah. And so, like you said, you worked with all those bands.
Worked with Ry
Red.
Cooder, David Lindley, Jackson Brown, Bonnie Raitt,
Beautiful.
Little Feat, Poco.
A lot of people you ended up working with in the studio.
Yeah,
too.
because it ended up that those people are my family of friends here.
Right. Okay.
So you've mentioned Rita Coolidge a few times. Like I met Rita when I was basically a kid and working with her. One of her best friends who played with Chris Christopherson was a guy named Stephen Bruton.
Okay.
Whose record I went on to produce later on and engineer his records. And Stephen's one of my best friends in life. He died of cancer in 2009. The movie Crazy Heart is taken from his life story.
Wow.
Him and Jeff Bridges were really super tight, and T-Bone Burnett, and so that movie is dedicated to Stephen. So people like Rita now are back in my life, but I met her when I was a kid. It's funny.
Wow.
And throughout my career, though, those people, the bass player on this record, Bob Glob, who was the bass player in Jackson Brown's band and David Lindley's band, and in records, didn't tour with Lindley, but I've been very fortunate to have this family of friends that I stepped into as just a young teenager here in LA, become my family of friends kind of for now the rest of my life, so to speak.
So,
I look up to, like when I saw Jackson Brown at the Clapton concert this last September, and he grabbed me by my jacket, and Jackson, who's like, I mean Jackson's like, he's like a big brother figure to me and stuff, and he comes up to me, he goes, "That frickin' Tajmo record sounds so damn good." Except his face was right next to my face, and people that were standing around were wondering if I was being yelled at by Jackson Brown. It was so weird, except he was just like in my face, just like giving me love, except,
That's beautiful, man. That's cool that your family can also, you can hang with them in the studio as well. So it's like...
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, this town is, I'm very fortunate. I call it embarrassment of riches. I'm really... just so fortunate to have such amazing, friends that are musicians that are the best, and we watch out for each other.
So let's talk. Because
I think Nashville's the same though.
It is. It's a nice community, and that's the one thing I would say is like when I was here in LA, I missed a little bit of that community because it's so spread out. But you seem to be really tied into it, and your career has spanned, decades. You haven't fizzled out. So do you attribute that to just your work ethic, the people that you work with, all the above? Keeping up with the
I do have a
times?
work ethic. I definitely am not a slacker.
Right.
There's no, I think, from the depths of my humility. No, I definitely am someone who, like, when I'm in the studio, I'll be bending down, looking inside a, positioning microphones. I'm not someone who just sits and points fingers and tells people to do shit. And Yeah, I mean, I really like that passion for what we do. I think is crucial in this business. As it gets harder, as far as making money.
Yeah.
If you don't love what you do,
Sure.
if you're not passionate about it, I think just get out of the way.
Sell
There's someone right
insurance.
behind you.
Right.
I mean, we're in a studio
Totally.
here that is run by my buddy Matt, who I met when he was going to school at LMU.
And this is an amazing, I mean, it's an amazing facility, but these are fewer and far between.
Yeah, Matt has the passion.
Yeah.
We will meet him soon.
Yes, we will meet him.
But Matt Linesch, he's he's got an API and a sidecar and
it sounds
tape machine and
sounds
tons
damn
of
good.
gear.
We heard his Uris, and they sound pretty damn good.
I mean, you have to be passionate. You got to want to be committed, and you got to want to dive in and go full on. And I think, there's no half measures anymore. Not really that there ever were, but there were times in the business when there was a lot of money floating around, and people got in and they made some bucks and they got out. And most of us that are in, we didn't come in with a B plan. There was no backup plan.
Right.
We came in and you go in and full on, and you love what you do, and you service. The reason I do what I do is because I decided that there was a point in my life where the music that was coming out of my hands was not the music in my head, and I realized that if I was going to work with the greatest in the world, it wasn't going to be as a player.
Right.
It was going to be serving them. And deciding that's totally fine, And
I like the word serve. You're serving someone. You're giving back. You're giving to people as well.
Because that's where abundance comes from.
Exactly.
Not to get overly spiritual.
No. You're totally right. And so I do want to because we want to get Matt in here because this is his place.
Matt in here.
Let's talk about the Rita record because I want to compare and contrast what we do in Nashville to what you're doing here, and it seems like. You're not locked in an apartment programming MIDI tracks like I would say a lot of LA engineers nowadays. You're still actually tracking organically with musicians in one room. So just tell us, like for instance, this record, which we can't listen to, but you guys can
He's
check
saying
it out.
this record, the record is, it's called Safe in the Arms of Time.
Okay.
Pardon. It's called Safe in the Arms of Time. It's Rita Coolidge. It's coming out in May.
Okay.
So whenever this podcast or
it's probably going to be May by the time we edit it.
So May 5th is the release of Safe in the Arms of Time on Blue Elan Records.
Cool.
Rita and I connected about over 2 years ago through her attorney, a guy named David Helfand, who's a dear friend. And Helfand came to me and he said, Rita wants to make a record. We got her a record deal. And not to get overly political, but she was signed to a label in Austin, Texas that was, now I will get political, was owned by a guy named Kelsey Warren, who is funding the pipeline through Marfa. And he's funding the pipeline in North Dakota that is displacing and going through Indian land. At the time, my friend Stephen Bruton's widow, Mary Bruton, said to me, oh, you can't make this record for that guy. Rita's an Indian. And when you do some homework on him, you'll find out. So long story short, we ended up getting her off of that record deal.
Wow, dude. That's pretty cool.
Instead of making a great record for a politically incorrect figure. And then, she's Rita's a Cherokee Indian. So that would have been a travesty. So we got her off. We got her onto this label. Kirk Passage, who's the owner of Blue Elan, has Geneva Magnus, the blues artist, and Rusty Young from Poco, and a bunch of really cool artists. He's a real lover of music, and he's a total believer, and he basically just let me make a record and got out of the way. So I picked all the songs except for 3 that, 2 I hooked her up with Kebmo, who's one of her favorite artists, so I introduced the 2 of them. She co-wrote with Kebmo. There's 2 songs with him, and then one of my best buddies in life is the ex-drummer of the Heartbreakers, a guy named Stan Linesch, living in Florida. And Stanley writes and produces the Eagles and Don Henley. And so Stanley wrote with Rita 1 song, and then he co-wrote. And all the rest are songs I found for her. And funny enough, a lot of great Nashville writers, like Tom Douglas, Gordon Kennedy.
So at that point, as the producer, are you reaching out to the pubcos or just relationships?
I was reaching... all based in relationships.
Yeah.
My guitar player on the record is from Austin. One of my best friends, David Grissom, who
I think I know that.
came up playing with Joe Ely and John Mellencamp, and then I co-produced his band Storyville with Chris and Tommy, Double Trouble. And David's just a gunslinger, but one of my best friends. And then I got Bob Glob to play bass.
Cool.
And then my friend JT, and he played organ and piano. And then I had some other friends. And then my drummer is a guy named Brian McLeod, who plays he plays on my Ziggy Marley, Melissa Etheridge, Roger Waters.
Yeah.
So Toy Matinee.
Common thread there.
Yeah. So again, you get your friends in the studio to make music with. But yeah, as far as songs, these songs were songs that I went and found to be songs about empowerment and about love and loss. And
are you working with Rita in the song choice, or are you primarily guiding the vision? Or I know it varies for each project.
Well, for me, yeah. I mean, the beautiful thing about this record is that both of us have had some real heavy stuff go down, in the last few years. This year, I lost my brother to cancer, and a few years ago, her sister was murdered by her sister's husband, and then he killed himself.
Wow.
So Priscilla, who was her best friend, and so Rita's gone through a lot of stuff. I've gone through a bunch of stuff, and so when I was looking for songs, I was looking for songs that were powerful, uplifting, and empowering, but had depth that could speak to a life story.
Sure.
And make the record she never made when she was in Delaney and Bonnie and Friends and Joe Cocker. Like, she never made that kick-ass record. By the time she made records, the 70s had already sort of taken over. She had left Delaney and Bonnie and Joe Cocker. And for people who don't know Rita Coolidge, do your homework, because Rita's part of the legendary end of the 60s with the band that went on to become the band that was Layla and All Things Must Pass. And that was Delaney and Bonnie's band with Jim Gordon on drums, Carl Radel, Bobby Whitlock. So she's part of the legacy, and she's also part of the 20 Feet from Stardom, until she actually got there.
Yeah. Now, is she English, though? Or?
No, Rita's from Florida.
But she just
actually from Memphis, and she lives in Florida.
Okay.
So she's from the South. She's a good Southern girl. Makes great gumbo. Marciel, we've all had her gumbo.
Yeah. So you get the songs, and you guys are kind of coming from the same place, finding the songs and the vision and all that, and then so you got the players in mind when you hear all this, and the album sounds really like organic and all that. So at that point, as a producer, are you thinking this is the right tracking space? Like, how do you even pick that from all the studios in town? And
part of like making records is seeing the finish line before you start.
Right.
I mean, I think you have to have a vision, sort of like getting on I use this analogy often. It's like getting on a freeway, and if you like get on and start driving and you don't know where you're going, you could end up going 100 miles north when you should have only gone about 5 miles south. So for me, I have to have a vision before I start, and the vision I had is what I just said to you: songs are about empowerment, about love, about spirituality, with a certain like bittersweet quality in it. So I want to deliver that musically, sonically, arrangement-wise, and then the space of the sound needs to be intimate. So I don't want a huge, like, massive studio where I've got to close down the sound. I want a studio that allows me to use the room and the space of the room for the record in that respect. And the drums are always kind of the most crucial thing in that respect, because if you have a drum sound that has a certain amount of size but doesn't have that really long, echoey sound, and that foundation is already being built in the sound of the record.
And you've probably worked in this town long enough to almost know every room and kind of what you're getting.
I do, yeah. I went to Sunset Sound, because Sunset Sound is that sound, and it's where she made records too.
Oh,
so,
cool.
The history of music is in those walls.
Right.
You walk in, and I mean, I made Van Halen's last record, which was done there. I've made Doobie Brothers' last record. So the sound of that room is the sound that I like.
Sure.
And so,
and you're not as concerned about Mike Locker because you're bringing a lot of your own.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, Mike Locker is so unimportant to me.
Right.
It's the space that I'm in.
Yeah.
I have tons of great mics, and I can supplement, and I could make a record with 57s. Who cares?
Yeah.
Gear is so overrated.
Yeah.
People that are like all caught up in mic pre's and compressors and microphones, all that's great, and it's great. I mean, I love my gear. I do. We're nerds. We can talk gear all day. But in the end, the gear is not what makes a great record. It really isn't. It's,
songs, players,
it's like
artists.
You put great tools in the hands of someone who can't use them, and the gear isn't going to make any sense. And you give my friend Nico Bolas just recently made a whole record with 57s.
Really?
Why? Because he said so. Because he's like, I'm going to do this.
That's pretty cool.
So
are you? But in general, it sounds like you're kind of doing what we do in Nashville. But the problem with Nashville, as we all know, is that every record kind of sounds the same because they're using the same players. So good or bad, it fits the radio format. But
I'll never sit here and bag on Nashville because I love Nashville. I love my Nashville.
Yeah.
I don't live there, so
Yeah.
I'm not, but I love going to work there. And the two differences that I can see as an engineer that goes and works in Nashville is there's a different mindset. I think in the core of Nashville is the song first and the record making maybe not as much.
Yeah.
So when I go to Nashville, those sessions start at 9 in the morning or 10, 9, whatever the start time is, and it's a 3-hour session, and then there's
it's definitely
lunch
a time thing. Yeah.
Man, in LA, when you book a session in LA, the musician knows he's going to be there until whenever the day is over.
Yeah.
And depending on what your work, what your vibe is like, you're not going to take lunch maybe at 1 o'clock. Maybe you'll take lunch at 3 o'clock.
Sure.
Maybe it's
more
way more
flexible,
flexible.
kinda.
Yeah. And LA has always been a place where you kind of take as long as you need to take. And, money now has maybe altered that a bit, but the mindset is not so fixated on the sessions and the blocks of time.
Makes sense.
Which Nashville is very much based in those blocks of time.
Even the songwriting happens in the 10 to 1 and the 2 to 5. And
totally, right?
Right.
So the mindset, and I believe, I'm very much, we could talk all day about mindset or spirituality and those kinds of things, because those are things that drive me and have constantly driven me, and I've absorbed a lot of that over my life through the people I've been around who are spiritual and work off of a certain philosophy, or like when it's right, it's right. You get it in a first take, it's awesome. You get it in a 20th take, it's awesome. Or maybe you didn't get it that day and you got to come back to it.
Sure.
I don't think in Nashville they ever come back to something again the next day and say we didn't get this the day before. Just they don't. It's going to be okay, because if that song is good,
right.
It's kind of hard to kill a good song. But in LA, I think there've been probably a lot of really great records made on lesser songs.
I gotcha.
In Nashville, there've probably been a lot of great records made on lesser recordings.
Sure. That makes sense.
And
that
maybe
totally makes sense.
And maybe that's, if you were going, but the musicianship in Nashville, I don't think any musician in Nashville is ever not compared. Like they're like, name the guys down there, name the guys here.
Yeah.
They're all great.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's like if I was in Nashville and using Michael Rhodes, I'd get Michael Rhodes on bass. If I'm here, I'm using Bob Glaub.
Sure.
No one ever said one guy is better. You know what I mean?
At that level.
At that level, it's crazy. That's why I say it's an embarrassment of riches. But
well, okay. So going back, because I do want to finish out the Rita thing.
Yeah.
So was it a day per song, or like you said, you kind of felt it out?
Well, no. It's like, on the Rita record, I got 3 first takes on this record.
Wow.
But I did like 5 or 6 takes on those songs, and by the time we went up to 3, 4, 5 takes, 6 takes, I was like, you guys aren't going to get. We got to go back and that's my job as a producer, is to know that first take that had some kind of thing about it maybe didn't have all the perfection in it, but it was absolutely perfect for the song. And then there were songs that, on one particular song, I know that like we hit it as the end of the day, and we were like, we're not getting this. We're going to come in the morning and get it. Cool. So for me, there really isn't, like when I go to make a record, like I know when you got it and I know when we don't. Fortunately, I've gotten to the point in my career where I feel pretty confident in that. There was a time when I wasn't, but with Rita's record, I really had a vision going in. Yeah. The players were players that we were all like so connected, and this is one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had making a record during a time that was probably the hardest year of my life, and the death of my brother and stuff. So, I feel really good about this record, and I feel really beautiful about the songs and the message, and and for her, she's so in love with it. It makes me really happy that,
that's
again,
great.
serving an artist like that who's in her 70s.
Her voice still sounds amazing. Can we talk just a little technical?
Yeah,
What was
sure.
your vocal chain on her there? Because so in your face and nice.
We worked, first off, I had a really good 67 that wasn't sounding great until I sent it to Klaus.
Yeah.
Klaus Heine.
Yeah.
He sent back that 67, and then we sat here with Marciel, who's the assistant, and we put up probably about 10 or more microphones to really see whether that's 67. So Matt, who owns the studio, and Marciel, the three of us did a day with Rita, having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We put up, literally I put up my friend's, he's got a M49,
Right.
my 67, my C12, a 250, a Bach 250, some Mojave 250.
Well, that's pretty good. Can't go wrong with
bunch
one
of
those.
bunch of mics. 87. We put up we had a whole. It was like, because for me her vocal. I had to get her vocal. Like I had
the
to.
tone is so rich.
So I got my 67 won, and then Fillmore makes an OP6, which is an RCA big fat tube preamp.
So it's a reissue.
The reissue of the OP6.
Wow, that's cool.
So I tried that, and I tried the Neve, and I tried another, and then the OP6 won. That was the total winner. And then that's going into a Furlot optical, what's that? I don't know, TL4 or whatever that is. It's like the VAC rack, which is not an LA3A or not an LA2A. It's like a little faster, but it's, so I'm knocking her down with an opto and just not doing a ton of compression on the way in.
Man.
And then when I mix her through a chain, which is a stay level and a distressor on her.
Yeah.
Both a dual compression on the mix, which is the thick and girth of the stay level, and then the quickness to knock down peaks on the distressor. And the distressor is so versatile because I can really adjust my attack and release.
That's cool.
So the mix is almost always the same chain with varying degrees. And on some of the songs on the mix, it's not the stay level because she was so thick that I have her in the 176.
Right.
So there's a lot of retro on the vocal. There's always a lot of retro in my mixes.
Man, you're a retro guy.
Yeah.
That's great. Retro's amazing. Yeah.
I love the stay level on the bass. I love, so.
Do you, when you're dealing with an artist of that caliber, are you putting them on the floor for scratch the whole time for every take, or are you just getting a scratch and then they're tracking?
Yeah, like often with her, I would have her track like 1, 2, like to really nail the arrangement. You got to hear a vocal and know. Like for me, there's a lot of like moments in the song where the arrangements hang for like a 6/4 bar or an extra, whatever. So you got to have a vocal to hear. But I really on this record wanted the vocals. I didn't want to just like cave in and say, okay, that scratch vocal is great.
Yeah.
And with Rita, with full respect, she's 72 years old, and the stamina to hang through multiple takes on tracking.
I don't think I'd do that with anyone, but I'm just...
So, that's out of due respect.
Yeah.
And then, so she sings a couple. I keep that one. They track to that. She sits with me in the control room, and while we're tracking, I'm looking at her too, and I can cop a vibe of when, like, her body language tells me that take really affected her because she's been, someone that's been making records as long as she has. Rita's got amazing instincts. She's an incredible woman, and I love her to death. And it's been, like you have to honor that. You can't like just. Sometimes with a young artist, they don't really know. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes young artists really do know. So you have to sort of gauge what you're going to get, as a producer, from your artist. So,
well, skipping ahead then. So you got the tracks, you're doing overdubs. She comes back to your place. I'm just trying to get the process. Comes back to your place or here to do
we're here at
vocals?
Infinitespin. That's the name of the studio we're in right now, called Infinitespin Recorders. This is where I did all the vocals, all the overdubs. I cut the bass, drums, guitar, basic guitars, and piano at Sunset Sound, Whirly, whatever was on the basic tracks, and then did guitars here. Did some guitars in Austin with David Grissom there, and the guitars here done with a guy named Joey Landreth, who's from Canada. He's playing all the slide.
Nice.
And the vocals and B3 and percussion, and cello. And
Yeah.
So my buddy Matt Linesch owns the studio, and Matty came up as my assistant.
Yeah.
And so he's got this beautiful studio here that was originally owned by Simon Phillips, and it's a great space. It was originally built by the percussion player Sheila E.
Sheila E.
So she built it, and then he bought it, and then Matty now owns it from
it's
Simon.
beautiful, really.
So it's a great space, and we just loved work. I love working here, and Rita loves working here. So I don't like closet recording.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't
But
like.
you
being,
do like mixing at home? Because
I love mixing at home.
Yeah. Okay.
My space at home, the Boogie Motel, is where I've been mixing since the early 2000s. I won a Grammy for "Love Is My Religion" with Ziggy Marley. I mixed that out of my house. I figured if I'm winning a Grammy at home, no one's coming to me saying you should have mixed it somewhere else.
Right. Amen. But you do, speaking of gear, you do some stuff out of the box.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay.
I'm a hybrid mixer. I have to be.
Yeah. So all in all, with the tracking and then the mixing back at your place, 3 or 4 weeks at least on this record, or more?
This record took quite a long time.
You're doing it right. Yeah.
The tracking was all done in a week, the basic tracks. The overdubs were done over a period of time. The record from soup to nuts, from the day of tracking till the finish of the mix, was approximately 6 months. But a lot of time down, not down time, but my brother was dying.
Yeah.
So I had to take time off
Sure.
to be with him. I had to go to Nashville because we got Keb Mo to play and sing on the record, so I went down to Nashville. And so I had to wait for Keb because he was on the road with Taj, doing the Taj Mo tour of the record I made, which maybe in a week we'll have a Grammy, and by the time this comes out, I will have won or lost another Grammy.
That's how time works, yeah. Are you going to New York?
I'm not.
Okay.
No.
It's a trip, man.
Yeah.
So.
Again, my priorities. My mother lives in New York still. If I was going to go to New York and spend the time and money to go to New York and be at the Grammys for 3 or 4 days and not have that 3 or 4 days with my mom at 91 years old, that's really insane. It is. Those are where my priorities are.
Great,
I'm staying out here. I'll go to the NAMM show for a day, and then I got work. I'm mixing a band for my buddy Casey Wasner, who was in Keb Mo's band and also plays in Robin Ford's band, but he's a producer in Nashville.
Yeah.
So Casey's producing this band called Bishop Gun, which the guy that owns Dave Gobb's room, Studio 2, this guy I'm managing that band and stuff.
Cool,
so,
man. Cool.
But it was about 6 months, and that was primarily on me, to be honest, and Rita, because she does some touring. She lives in now Tallahassee, Florida. She was going back and forth, and so she would sing for 3 or 4 days, and then she didn't sing for Marciel 3 weeks or something. Yeah, a couple weeks, and then she'd come back up. So if you're going to count all the days, it wasn't that much time, but there was a lot of time in between.
And the reason I'm asking is just curious to contrast that back to the old days where, we won't say Steely Dan, but, longer record making process. But you got it all done in that span. It was still,
the record was completely recorded by September.
Yeah.
So I tracked the beginning of June, and we did all the drums and bass, all that went down in 5 days.
Sure.
So 12 songs in 5 days, which still, that's pretty. That's 3-4 songs a day.
Yeah.
Three.
Still pretty.
Yeah. So
fast.
So because that's with a day of setup too.
Yeah.
In those 5 days. So that's there. The tracking went down really fluidly, and then we took our time, overtime, to make the record that we wanted to make.
One other quick question, and then we're going to take a break and bring in Matty and all that good stuff. You were talking about the arrangements, because your job as a producer of arrangements. Are you charting in your pre-pro stuff and then writing cello solo here? Is it that much kind of, or is it kind of as you go along, you're saying it needs this or it needs that?
I did know I knew what I wanted as far as the solos and stuff.
Right.
And the charts are more Nashville style charts.
Okay. Yeah.
As far as
the
number charts.
Yeah.
But all the keys everything was absolutely picked out ahead of time.
Sure.
The songs were absolutely charted, basically down to the bar.
Yeah.
Before going in the studio, and then in the studio sometimes we'd futz around with.
Tones
we need to add 2 more bars here.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like we didn't add but it was never like we need to double the chorus or
Sure.
because to me that's really important.
Yeah.
That you walk in the door knowing
instrumentation too. Like we're gonna do the basic tracks on B3 or piano. Or
piano,
guitar.
yes, but B3 or whirly or whatever. No, that's sort of like let's test it out. Yeah. But I'd never like to do a full run through of a song on a fishing expedition.
Sure.
Because I want my first take to be usable.
Yeah.
So I as a producer, don't go fishing and then play a whole song and wish that
people start getting used to it,
Yeah, because the sonics and the feel. So a lot of times it'd be like, well, what are we going to track on? As far as guitar, Grissom and I have such we've an unspoken language. He played on Big Daddy, the Mellencamp record, and then McMurtry Records, and we've worked together since the 80s. So we have an unspoken thing. And then JT's been working with Rita for 25 years as a keyboard player. So he knows, and we knew. JT and I had sat together at his studio in the Valley near me. He plays with Bruce Hornsby too, and I've known him since the 80s. Nice. So we sat and we were like, on this one, are we going to be B3, or are we going to be whirly, or are we going to be piano? Oh, this has to be piano. Oh, and this has to be whirly. And maybe this isn't whirly, and maybe this is a Rhodes, but we'll see what works when we hear it,
Makes sense. Yeah. Well, that's cool, yeah.
That way you get to keep it.
Yeah, exactly.
You do a first take.
Yeah.
It's not like the drums and bass are great, but we got to replay everything else.
That's great. I think that's
4-piece is such a great way to cut, because so much music coming off the floor on the.
All right, so we have to do these little breaks, so we're going to take a quick break. Thanks so much. We're with Ross now. We're going to bring in Maddie, and it's going to be fun. See you in a second.
The town has this energy. You never know who you're going to bump into.
We moved to Nashville, and I started singing in clubs 5 nights a week.
On any given night, you can go to the End and watch a show. You go to Tootsie's and watch a show. You go to Exit Inn. You go to the Ryman.
They're sick musicians and sick singers. It doesn't surprise me. It's Music City.
We're back, and this is Ross.
Oh, we're back. Not our back, but we're back. So we're in Infinitespin Recorders, which is my friend Matt Linesch's studio. And I wanted to introduce Matt because he's like my brother here. He is my brother.
Oh.
Yeah. Word. Word. But Maddie was going to LMU 10 years ago?
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I go into LMU often, like once or twice a year, and teach. And so LMU, for those who don't know, is Loyola Marymount University. And Matt was a senior in production there. So I went into Loyola and was teaching that night. And I always tell the same story, which is the room basically had one person with a pulse. And that was Matt. More than a pulse. But they had Spicoli over there eating his Spicoli had his pizza. They had the girls in the back that were taking the course because they thought they could get away easy.
Yeah.
A couple of dudes that, I don't know what they're doing these days. They're probably still working at Trader Joe's or whatever. But Maddie came up afterwards and he was like, hey man, if you ever need somebody or whatever. And I was like, well, matter of fact, your timing's perfect. I'm just in the middle of a Doobie Brothers record and there's like so many people in this room every day. And like a Starbucks run is like one guy can't even bring back a Starbucks run. Yeah. So if you want to come to Sunset Sound and come by the studio, I'll put you to use immediately. And so basically Matt, from that day forward, basically hung with me for like 5 years or so, 4 years. Beautiful. We did the Doobies. He took all my gear to Portland for a record with Steve Berlin and the guys that are a bunch of really great musicians playing on this are the artist. And we did Van Halen. He was my guy up at Eddie's studio where Eddie doesn't want anybody that isn't trustworthy and stuff. And then there came a point in time where Matt was ready to fly and we were working together and he got the call to go work with Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros and I was like, you better pack some spare clothes because those guys are like a commune. And so Matt has many records later and a Golden Globe Award with
Nice.
with Alex of Edward Sharp and this awesome studio that we're in. And so I get to intro my boy Matty here.
So tell us about it, man. Pretty API here.
Yeah,
How does-
API. We get a little. It's a 1972 40-channel API. They made 3 of them that year. I don't know what happened to the other 2. This one was painted white in '86.
Okay.
From what I'm told, Brent Averill painted it white in '86.
Wow.
It was in a studio called Hyde Street Recording in San Francisco for many years.
Yeah.
Apparently upstairs, like around some corner, and the only reason I know all that is because moving this thing is crazy. It's 1,300 pounds. It takes 10 guys to move it, and I engineered, the hell out of it and figured out how to get it in here. And then we've got a neat
Sidecar. I don't know if we can see
16-channel
our
neat.
sidecar, but
Yeah.
we may take a quick tour.
We'll take a
afterward.
tour.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting studio. It was built in the '80s by Bobby Summerfield, who you know.
Yeah,
Bobby.
I do know Bobby.
You know Bobby. I've only spoken to him on the phone because I was like, where do I put the console? I got one shot at this.
Yeah.
Where do I put it in the room? And it's a great studio. I love this studio. I love being here. I'm here every day.
Well, I noticed you. I mean, you're doing some work. I mean, you're improving too.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Oh yeah.
sawing some boards out there or something.
Yeah, we're building an outside patio area,
Nice.
and there's a B room here that we're developing. The lounge out here we're going to be developing. It's all, I just want to make it a spot where people come, feel comfortable. Just,
Yeah, it's a cool vibe. Well, once
relax.
again, I want to take a tour of the tracking space because it's a nice little paintings. And
It's a very
paint,
comfortable space to work in.
Yeah.
As I was talking about coming in here, I was really the first legit client for Matt with Rita.
Absolutely.
And, for like myself and for someone like Rita Coolidge, we've worked in, legit studios. So I didn't want to bring her to some little doghouse somewhere, some little back, with some spot that doesn't. And so walking in here, it was like, she was like, wow, this is legit, because it is,
nice.
so.
And you got your Uris, I see. Are
Yeah,
those the
we
newest
just-
purchase?
Well, it's not a new purchase, but they're the newest to the room. I had them rebuilt.
Nice.
So I got them, had them rebuilt. Yeah, they sound great. We've got the Manley ML10, the Tannoys, the hot houses. Behind the consoles, my 827 and a BX20 Spring. And it's really my goal. I had the mastering room at United at the end of the hall across from Studio B for 3 years.
Yeah.
And it was cool. When I was there, I kept renting the studios across the hall.
Yeah.
And I spent all this money renting these studios across the hall. And so I kind of got to this point where I said, well, why not just have a studio that I don't need to, and so I, worked really hard to get to this point. But my goal was to be able to offer, like what Ross was talking about, offer the similar experiences, professional level studio, but maybe a little more like you're not too afraid to set
Laid
a cup
back,
here, and a
Exactly.
little more like, you can settle in, you can leave stuff out, and, but it still provide that still pro level recording and production, and we can do anything we want in that room. It's a drummer's room.
Yeah.
Sheila E. and Simon Phillips.
I noticed it was pine too, and I didn't
It's
know
pine.
Bobby did. That's probably some.
Well, I've been told, I don't know, but I've been told it's a South African thing.
Okay, cool. No, that's man.
He's South African.
He's South African. He's right. He's South African. Yeah, okay.
Before I forget, and we'll mention this at the end too, but what is your website, or how do people find out more about the studio or see pictures?
So we're actually building the website right now.
Okay,
I mean,
cool.
I got the studio in May, so I'm just now getting to the point. Yeah, that's pretty quick actually. Yeah, the website will be infinitespinrecorders.com.
Okay.
I have my website, which you can always go to mattlinesch.com.
Okay.
And get in touch with me through that. Yeah.
So you graduate LMU.
Yeah.
Ross is benevolent here, and you're hanging out with him, but you're also working by yourself, at United and other studios. So when you're first cutting your chops in this town, are you taking demos? Because that's how it is in Nashville. We do demos.
Sure.
I don't know if you guys even have those, but
You
doing
mean people making demos
for songs?
Yeah, for songs.
Or are
sure.
you doing mainly bands?
I never really got too excited about the demo world.
I know. It's not too exciting.
What I was doing when I got out of school, and was working with Ross, and I'm sure Ross would remember this. I always had a notebook.
Yeah.
It was always whether it was in my small notebook in my pocket or something, and I just always took notes on everything because there's just so much going on.
Yeah.
And it also made me be more useful to him because I was taking notes on things, and we kind of, we knew that everything was documented for each day. But then I would go and I would find bands, Craigslist, friends, whatever, and I'd work in smaller studios and try out the things that I'm learning from Ross. Try out the things that I'm observing, And slowly that started getting better. I started doing better. And then...
One of the things, to just interject for a second, one of the things that I always say to kids or anyone coming up, and particularly if they're working with me, is write it down.
Sure.
Like there's two things. First, I don't want to see you put it in a phone.
Yeah.
Because if you're looking down, putting it in a phone, I don't know whether you're texting your girlfriend or not.
Yeah, it's just right.
And so if I look at you and you're doing that, my mind just says you're texting and you're not part of what's going on.
Right.
But more importantly than that, you can't carry important information in your head. Write it down, because the important stuff that you need to be is present to the moment.
Sure.
Yeah.
But always have a way of putting thoughts on paper for later. And so if I say something that you like, write it down. So the first thing I said to Matt was, make sure you have a notepad and pen and have it in your pocket. And the beautiful thing about Matt is that Matt actually listened. He did. He actually listened. And it wasn't like I was some, brilliant guy, whatever, but it was like learning from the people that I was around. Because he was fortunate that he was around the Doobie Brothers.
Totally.
Right off the bat.
cool.
Yeah.
Or Van Halen.
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
Not bad gigs to start with.
Or Brian McLeod,
Yeah.
Davey Farragher, who's Elvis Costello, Val McCallum, who is Jackson Brown.
Yeah.
That was the band up in Portland. So
right.
Matt's first experiences was he was surrounded by the best musicians in the world.
Sure.
Yeah.
If you're going to be around those people, make sure you walk away learning something.
Sure.
And write it down. Don't carry it in your head.
Yeah.
Your head's a terrible place to hold on to shit.
You lose
I
it.
think
mug it.
there's actually research on that writing creates more neural connections than, but anyway, that's...
Well,
so
when I write
education
things
stuff.
down, especially when I would, take notes on things, I can most of the time close my eyes and read it.
Yeah.
Off my,
Yeah.
something
cool.
about- yeah. So, that was, and I always made a point of keeping in touch with people as well. Like, I'm always been very social. I know that this whole industry is built on relationships.
Sure.
Sure. So, I had kind of the target musicians or the people that I would like to work with.
Yeah.
I've always been a huge fan of Alex Ebert and Edward
And so how did
Sharp.
that, how did that
Well,
relationship...
I met Alex and he was lead singer of I'm a Robot, which was a band that he had back in the day, and always loved that. Was one of my favorite bands at that point, and so I always kept in touch with Alex. Kind of made a point of sending him some sort of a text or a message every 6 months.
Are they based out of here?
Yeah, they're based out of here.
Okay.
But then Alex doesn't live here anymore. But
Okay.
the band was formed here in LA.
Okay.
And it's just one of those situations where you're learning. I'm learning from Ross. I'm trying things out. I'm getting better at what I'm doing. And when an opportunity arises, you step up to it.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of a sort of a classic situation like that where Alex needed somebody, helped put together a studio in Ojai. I had, I stepped up to the plate and helped him. And
I remember the day. We were actually in the studio recording my
just
friend
starting out. Yeah.
my friend David Ryan Harris, who plays with John Mayer.
Yeah.
And we were in the studio with a bunch of great players, Aaron Sterling, I think. And Matt gets his phone call and he comes in and he goes, man, I hope that this isn't disrespectful or whatever. But I got this opportunity
To bail and...
I'm like, dude,
I gotta go right now.
I'm like, I'm like, the time you're taking to explain this, you should be in your car driving to Ojai.
Good for you.
Just make sure you have some clean underwear.
Because
this is gonna take a while.
And it took a while. The first album took 11 months.
Wow.
Every day.
And you've done several, right? A lot of work with...
Yeah, I did. I've done 3 studio
Yeah.
albums. I did a live album, which took me about a year and a half.
Sure.
Almost working every day. Did the Robert Redford film "All Is Lost" with Alex.
Oh, wow.
And
Golden
then we
Globe.
did
That's right.
And then a bunch of little one-off things.
Okay,
You
cool.
know, yeah.
So when you're building a new room, and then we're gonna get into
Sure.
some other cool, fun questions. Hey,
Okay.
that's cool. But when you're building a room like this, how do you decide? Okay, how much in the box, how much outboard, how much hardware, what do I invest in what? It's I'm
it's
just sure
mostly
you're
like
still-
how much money can I
Right.
get by with in the bank account,
Right,
and
right.
then that's where I work from.
Okay,
you know? You know, I really like putting my hands on gear because I feel that when I look at sound, I hear differently versus just Marciel, my assistant, will take notes on all of my equipment, when I'm done, and take pictures on everything. And half the time I'm kind of asking him, oh, well, what did I do on that guitar? Because I just kind of I went until it felt right.
Yeah.
And, but there's a lot about digital that you can't ignore these days. So it's like Ross said, it's a hybrid.
Sure.
You're doing a hybrid. Even during my tracking sessions, I track to my tape machine.
Oh,
but
cool.
I simultaneously print to digital.
That's great.
And
Where's
I
your
also
tape machine? I
it's
don't know.
behind.
Okay.
It's back there. Yeah.
That's good.
And I also track digital. So I
Nice.
have, it's double tracking. I've got 24 analog, 24 digital, and it's immediately coming off the tape machine. Then I'm kind of using the attributes of tape, the compression, the things that like I kind of maybe want to use as it becomes a creative tool.
Sure.
essentially. Instead of becoming the medium that you're actually recording on, it becomes like this creative tool. And that's,
So then are you A-Bing? Or are you saying, well, then...
There are times where I will maybe take a song and say, okay, well, I would rather use the digital of the guitar.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
often,
Yeah.
but sometimes.
Cool.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
So I just, it's a decision that it's...
And are you doing most of your mixes on here, or is it mainly for tracking as far
Oh
as
yeah,
the
no,
API?
I do all my mixing on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and on the Neve.
Nice.
I've got 56 IO here at the studio, and then I have the stereo bus of my API goes to a benchmark 2-track converter.
Okay, cool.
So I guess my thought process on it was that if I'm mixing analog, I'm creating maybe these other harmonics and stuff using tube gear, using saturation from the console and all, then maybe capturing it through like a higher end converter
clean and
gives it's so subjective, but that's my vibe on it, So,
it is, and just find what works. But I noticed you do have a lot of retro, so you must have gotten that idea from
Phil's
someone.
come by. Yeah, well, it runs in the family.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Ross, you were talking about and I'm just curious what else is on your master bus, but I know in one interview I listened, you have some retro on your master bus too. Has it changed?
No, I don't have retro on my
2A3 or whatever.
The 2A3 is actually on my bass.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you
that's
have that
on the
little
bass.
trick on that.
Yeah, I go in and out of the side to side on that. So it's double 2A3. So I go out of one side into the other side.
Okay.
So it's like I get 1.5 and 4K on my bass.
That's cool. That's cool.
And I get to roll off, some 20 and add 60 or whatever, But on my mix bus, it's kind of complicated. I do a passive transformer called the Iron Giant mix bus, which is something that I've been playing around with for years with my friend Devin Power, which are passive transformers. And the Iron Giant, homage to my dad, who was the artist, he taught those guys how to draw, Brad Bird and those guys.
Really?
So when they did the Iron Giant, my dad had just died, so they named the kid Hogarth in that movie. So if for people who have kids, they know that movie because their kids have watched it.
See, all these little tidbits
So,
we're learning.
so that kid's named Hogarth in the Iron Giant. Yeah, and that was an homage to my dad because they was sort of a really, they made the little kid who they consider my father a giant. So in his, But so I go into passive transformers, which are like UTCs, like in the back, like a Fairchild transformer, which smooths the edges of digital right off the bat. Right. So I use a special converter, which right now I'm using Black Lions, but they've been, sometimes it's Crane Song, sometimes it's Burl, into the passive transformers, into my Dramastic Obsidian compressor. So I compress high pass filter in there, and then I EQ with a NTI and a with mastering Pultex.
Nice.
So there's a mixture between airband on the NTI, but the girth of the tube and transformers of the Pultex.
Nice.
When I'm doing TV stuff or movie stuff, I might pop in a Bax and really get rid of, and sometimes the Bax is in there even if I feel like there's a
to scoop the
sub low and the high and really close that stuff down. Because the Bax is great because you can pull off like 70K and you can pull off like 12 cycles. 18 cycles.
Wow.
So it really cleans up. Sometimes for records, I even want that. It just depends on the sound.
Yeah. Okay, so we have, this is the fun part. We have
That was the geek moment.
Yeah, I just don't want to nerd out too much. But I brought your gear list, Ross, but I'm not going to get into that.
It's actually, there's more gear now than
It's too much, dude. It's too much. Okay, so this section's called Rapid Fire, and I actually have to hold my notes here because.
Okay.
Let's start with a general one here. I'm going to ask Matt first. Where do you continually find inspiration? New records, books, other artists? What feeds your creativity?
I guess there's a couple places. One would be going to live shows.
Now, that's
I still
cool.
feel a lot of
That's
inspiration going to live shows.
Nice.
Yeah. And the other is I collect classic vinyl.
Okay.
Rock vinyl. And,
Okay.
it's still something that I really enjoy doing and find a lot of inspiration in.
Yeah.
And those are probably the two spots that I find the
Wow.
most inspiration.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Ross, you want to hit that one, or you want to?
I'm quick. For me, it's life's an inside job. So it's my inspiration comes from spirituality. So
Okay.
it's Buddhism, meditation,
Nice.
reading. So I do a lot of I read and movies too. But it's a spiritual. Life's a spiritual
Right.
adventure. So my inspiration comes. I just believe life's an inside job.
That's nice. That's nice. I think you just answered all the rest of the questions. Okay, so Maddie, what is your most, I don't know if this is a great word, but marked characteristic? Like if people remember you for one thing.
You mean as a...
Just
in general?
In general, and like
Probably
they're like
my
Maddie, that
hats.
guy. Okay,
Oh,
so
nice.
Your
Say
distinguishing
probably my
characteristics.
hats.
Okay,
Yeah.
I like that. See, you always
Yeah.
have to have something to
Yeah,
remember you by.
yeah.
Ross.
See, did I get to answer it on him too? I mean, the hat is definitely his visual, but I would say kindness. Matt's a very kind person.
Nice.
Thank
That's
you.
nice.
Everyone I've ever introduced Matt to is impressed by his kindness.
That's great. That's great. Okay, this one gets a little personal, but we're going to ask it anyway. I'm going to go with Ross, actually.
right.
What is your greatest fear?
My greatest fear. That's funny because there's some really great acronyms for fear, which is false evidence appearing real. What is my greatest fear? Do I even have a greatest fear?
Well, that's, yeah.
I don't. Because face everything and recover. I don't know. What's my greatest fear? Not. If I had a fear, which isn't a fear, but it's the thing that drives me, fear
Okay.
has always been the thing that's driven me.
Yeah.
So I do have, when I have a tracking session with a really important session, I wake up in the morning and fear is like, I don't fear failure, but I won't fail. So I use fear as the thing that drives me over
Makes sense. Makes
the
sense. Yeah.
wall. And I use fear as a driving
Yeah.
to be successful. So I guess would be I fear not having fear as something, but fear is not something that stops
Just
me.
Overwhelms you. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Because
Just pushes
fear
you
can
forward.
really overwhelm
it can.
and stop you. And then you're limited by the fear. So fear is an interesting thing
It
because,
is.
I use fear as an actual motivator.
That's cool. That's cool. Maddie, you want to try? You don't have to answer them all. So.
Let's see. I think that I'm the kind of person that is always looking way ahead.
Yeah.
So, I've always, I mean, I can give so many examples as to that, but it's an act of always striving for something. And I think that I would never want that to go away because
Yeah.
that drives me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes me constantly want to learn. One of the things I love about making records is that mixing is something that I will be learning the
Yep.
rest of my life. And that's inspiring to me. It makes me excited. And I would never want to have that. What's the word? I would never want to feel content. Mm-hmm. I mean, I want to
that's
feel
cool.
happy. I want to feel good. I want to feel.
You always have your
whatever.
notebook.
But I always want the notebook. I always, no matter what.
Yeah.
So. I guess that
You want to be
that's cool.
content. You just don't want to be.
I don't want to be
You don't want to
stagnant.
be complacent.
Right.
Complacent. That's
Yeah,
the word.
that's good.
It's the
Content
good.
is really
good.
fine.
Yeah. No, that's the
You
word
know,
I was looking
it's
for.
like
Complacent. Yeah.
like I always say, like, have a nice day unless you've made other plans. I mean, you want to be content. You want to be okay with it.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Ross, and
Complacent.
this doesn't have to be necessarily, I almost want to say it's not a person, but
Okay.
because people, obviously for us, people play an important role in
Sure.
our lives. What is your most treasured possession? So let's say treasured material possession, because that, something from your dad or?
Oh, I wear one of them. This ohm was
Yeah.
given to me by Stephen Bruton,
Nice.
who's no longer with us.
Yeah.
Which carries like the energy of who he was. He was someone who was like kind of what we're all talking about, which is like, don't be complacent.
Yeah.
So that's something. But I treasure my dad taught me, like, didn't teach me something specific as much as like what it is to be an artist is to think for yourself. So that's that's treasure.
Yeah.
And then my mother taught me about integrity, like standing up for what you believe in, almost at whatever cost.
That's great.
So between
Yeah.
those two things, I
Those are
try to
great.
carry that through my life, which is be an artist, serve artists by being an artist, but have integrity. Don't be a kiss ass.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
don't go to the lower common denominator.
Yeah.
No matter who they are, surround yourself with good people.
Right.
Be inspired by let yourself be open to be inspired, because that's artistry. If you're just closed off and you don't allow yourself to be contributed to,
Yep.
So
That's
I
great.
think those are two gifts.
You guys are doing well on this sex segment. Anything?
And my son,
Okay. I know. I'm that way too.
as a parent.
Yeah. How old is your son now?
20.
Is he rocking the skins? Or
He's
doing a lot of
he's
stuff?
all he's in the search.
Okay, yeah.
At 20.
I feel you.
My
Are you good on
answer?
that? Yeah, I mean, vinyl collection. Or
No, I like how Ross
Yeah,
answered
I
it
do
because
too.
it was like something that represented something. And I
Yeah.
think that like it's interesting because I too am wearing a necklace that means something, and it's from my cousin of mine that passed away recently, and something that I hold on with him is to always be like trying to find your full potential, and that's something that's really important to me. Is like always like being able to even question what is your full potential. A lot of people don't even question that.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah.
And Matt named the studio
Yeah.
as an honor to his cousin.
Really?
I did. Yeah,
That's awesome,
I did.
man.
Yeah. I got because it was last year he passed, and we were very close. We were born hours apart, so we were raised like brothers. And so and that was his,
That's so
social
cool.
media thing, Infinitespin, and it was very musical.
Yeah,
so
that's
I
cool.
decided,
I like that.
it's-
It is a
it's-
double, triple entendre.
Yeah. Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
Did you ever in your life own any piece of either inflatable or water-filled furniture? Ross, you lived in the 80s.
I did. Yeah. And actually, I wrote a song in the 70s as a kid about inflatable Judy.
Oh.
Which wasn't
That's
my
even better.
inflatable Judy, but when I moved to San Francisco, across the street were some real freaky people.
I'm sure
I
that
won't
there were.
say, anything more, but they were really freaky, and they had an inflatable Judy. Like literally, when I got the ad off of, we walked across the street. My buddies, there were 11 of us from New York living in this apartment together. All guys that grew up together, and we went across the street because this thing was like so bizarre we could see it through the window. We said, "What the heck is this?" And the one dude goes, "Well, it's an inflatable Judy," and he actually had
cool
the
hook.
ad there for it. And I wrote a song about inflatable Judy, and I literally took the ad and put it into all the lyrics.
My
So,
best
yeah,
friend,
I
she
didn't own
follows
it,
me
but-
around everywhere.
Yeah,
That's good.
Yeah.
Best travel companion. Put it in my suitcase.
that's it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but yes, inflatable furniture. We had it in San Francisco.
And anything?
You
You're
know,
probably
I think
too young to
I think
skip all of
I
that.
had 2 inflatable palm trees once.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. All
Yeah,
right.
I don't know what happened.
And I know this is a family show, but if you've ever been to Japan and you actually went to the bathhouses, you could never come back to California and see a inflatable pool.
Really?
Matt ever the same.
Okay. Well, I don't know. That's we'll have to do some research on that. Well, that's pretty much it, guys. But thank you for having us.
I have to finish on that note, right? Well, finish on an up note.
Let's give if people want to hire you, fund your studios, your websites, all of that. So Russ, go first. And then...
My production company, which I've had since the 80s, is called Hoax, Hoax Productions, which it's weird because now we live in this time where we've heard the word hoax quite often in the news, but that was my nickname growing up, but it wasn't Hoax. I'm Hogarth, so it was in New York. When you grow up, you always have to have a nickname,
right.
Either Three-Fingered Johnny or whatever, and you know what I mean. So I was Hoax, which was hoax, like playing football. It was like Hoax for Noakes. But when I started my production company, I always thought that production, there was a certain element to production that was a bit of a hoax. Like, really isn't about
Smoke
the artist.
Beers,
yeah. So it was like my little sort of joke to myself. So it's HOAX, hoaxproductions.com.
Very cool.
Or Ross Hogarth. It goes to the same place.
And your discography's there too, right?
Discography, whatever.
Check this guy's discography out because it's like the coolest thing from metal to to Rita.
I would be bored if I didn't do all styles of music. That's really, I mean, isn't...
Yeah.
You're
lucky though to be able to be blessed to work in all those
and blessed
to be able to do it too, which you do it great. So
thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you coming in,
it's great.
and not making this discussion be about do you like to put a Royer next to a 57 or whatever?
They can, go to Gear Sluts for that.
They can look at it.
Yeah. So I appreciate that because it's way more fun to talk about something that you are more, because how. It's not about where you put the microphone.
Exactly.
It's about what you think about when you're doing it.
Amen.
So.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Matty, we already talked about your website. Let's plug it one more time.
Twitter on Boogie Motel. So that's
yes. Okay.
Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah.
Instagram, Twitter. You'll see the. Whatever. Blah, 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 blah.
By the time this comes out, it's going to be totally different. So Twitter will be gone.
Yeah. The interwebs will be gone.
Yes.
Yeah, so I've got, we have Infinitespin Recorders.
In development.
The website.
By
But
the
you can
time it comes
there's an Instagram
Okay.
at Infinitespin Recorders. Just that's it, at Infinitespin Recorders. If you go to my website, mattlinesch.com, there is a contact place on there, and it'll go right to me.
And your discography is pretty cool too. So
it's growing. It's there's a bunch of fun stuff I've been working on. It'll be out soon. Yeah,
I'm excited about your space, man.
Me
so
too.
It's really cool. All right.
Good
well,
vibes.
cool. Thanks, guys.
Good
All right.
vibes.
So we'll see you next episode, and tune in then. Thanks.